Good morning, everybody. Hope your hump day, your Wednesday's off to a good start. Mine is so far. If you haven't already done so, grab yourself a second cup of coffee and we'll spend a couple of minutes in the Psalms as we have been over the last, say, month or month and a half. I've got mine right here in my favorite mug, my Yahweh mug. What we've been doing is sort of over the last several weeks looking at various psalms from different types, psalms of lament and of praise, and psalms that inspire confidence, and then today, Psalm of Thanksgiving. Psalm of Thanksgiving. I'm going to read from the first part of Psalm 107. Now, 107 is a fairly lengthy psalm. It's over 40 verses. It begins the fifth section of the Psalms. If you're looking at your Bible and flipping to the Psalms, you'll find that it is divided into 5 books. It is when it was edited together way back when, it was divided into 5 books to correspond theoretically with the 5 books of Moses, the Pentateuch, the Torah. And 107 begins the 5th book of the Psalms, the 5th section. And I'm going to read just the first 9 verses. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, for his steadfast love endures forever. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so, whom he has redeemed from trouble, and gathered in from the lands, from the east and from the west, from the north and from the south. Some wandered in desert wastes, finding no way to a city to dwell in. Hungry and thirsty, their soul fainted within them. Then they cried to the Lord in their trouble, and he delivered them from their distress. He led them by a straight way till they reached a city to dwell in. Let them thank the Lord for his steadfast love, for his wondrous works to the children of man. For he satisfies a longing soul, and the hungry soul he fills with good things. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, for his steadfast love endures forever. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, for his steadfast love endures forever. One of the most important things in the Christian life is to take a few minutes every so often to reflect on what God has done for you. It's essential that we always be thinking back, be aware of what God has done for us. So what has God given us? What has God given you? What has God done for us, plural, or what has God done for you, singular? I mentioned this in the sermon Sunday, that we need to reflect on what Christ has done, what Christ has saved us from, and what Christ has saved us for. What has Christ saved you from? And what has Christ saved you for? And those are equally important questions. If you look at these first 9 verses that I read, notice the verbs that the psalmist uses there that describe what God had done. God had redeemed, had gathered, delivered, led, satisfied, filled. The psalmist is thanking God for all of these things that God had done. That God had redeemed and gathered, delivered, led, satisfied, and filled. It is essential that we take time periodically to to reflect on what God has done so that we can adequately thank Him. An essential part of the Christian life is simply thanksgiving to God. When we go to the Lord in prayer, part of that needs to be in thanksgiving. One of the really helpful things to do in your prayer life is to always be aware of what you pray for. Some people actually write it down, list it, and you don't have to, but some people do that. And then reflect back on how God answered those prayers. 2 weeks ago, or 2.5, just last week, I remember on last Monday, I specifically asking God for something in my own life, and He delivered, and there it was, and I've been marveling at that ever since. We need to take time periodically to reflect on what God has done so that we can adequately be thankful. If we don't take time to reflect on what God has done, to be thankful to God, then we are opening ourselves up to all sorts of trouble. And Christians are not immune to fear and stress and anxiety. We are not immune to that. And I think particularly in 2020, in this year, in this season of our lives, that fear and anxiety is palpable all around us. And the media plays into it. I actually read that just a few days ago, that there's a discussion in the big dictionaries about including the term fear porn into upcoming dictionaries. Whether it'll make a dictionary, I don't know, but there is discussion of including that term fear porn. And if you're not familiar with it, it's a widely used term, and it refers to essentially what media outlets do. They play on people's fears and emotions and anxieties to get clicks, to get views, and that leads to more and more anxiety and more fear. And the media have really done that this year. They've done that this year. Now, COVID-19 is serious, and I do not take it lightly, but we have fallen victim to fear porn on it as well. This is serious. I've lost a good friend to it. Many of you have lost friends to it. But on the other hand, the media has played into our fears, and we have bought it, and it has robbed us of peace, and it has given us anxiety and depression and fear. Been a lot of different unintended consequences, if you will, that have come from the steps that have been taken to address the spread of this coronavirus. According to folks who study such things, been far as the skyrocketing, I can't put my words together this morning, skyrocketing rates of people seeking medical help for anxiety and stress. According to the CDC, and this is a stunning figure, according to the CDC, 1/4 of Americans between 18 and 24 have considered suicide during the pandemic. Fear and anxiety is very real, and it is debilitating, and it has consumed us in the midst of the pandemic. 1/4 of Americans between 18 and 25, according to the CDC, have considered suicide, seriously considered it during this pandemic. 31% of all Americans have dealt with anxiety or stress disorders. So in the midst of the fear, in the midst of the madness, and I hadn't even talked about just the general anxiety that I think all of us are feeling regarding the election. We are so polarized. In the midst of that, perhaps it is good that we take a few minutes to remember what God has done and is doing for us. The more we focus on the person of God, the smaller the things around us seem. If you remember, I guess it was 15 years ago, the book, the Prayer of Jabez, somebody just sold a gazillion copies of this little book about the Prayer of Jabez. That was the greatest prayer in the Old Testament. No, it's not the greatest prayer in the Old Testament. The greatest prayer in the Old Testament is Hezekiah's prayer in Isaiah 37. I'm going to read it for you because it summarizes where our attitude needs to be right now. So, Isaiah 37. The Assyrian army has surrounded Jerusalem. They've overrun the northern kingdom of Israel. They've invaded Judah, the southern kingdom, and have besieged Jerusalem. And as Hezekiah goes to the Lord in prayer, and here's what he says: O Lord of hosts, God of Israel, enthroned above the cherubim, you are the God, you alone of all the kingdoms of the earth. You have made heaven and earth. Right off the bat in this prayer, Hezekiah names who God is and reflects on the greatness of God and the majesty of God. And so he begins the prayer focusing on who God is and the greatness of God, the majesty of God, and compared to the greatness and the majesty of God, what are the Assyrians? Perhaps we need to do the same thing right now in how we approach our prayer lives and how we approach just the life in general, the Christian life in general. Begin reflecting on the majesty of God and the power of God and what God has done for us before we think about all of the ills of society that we see around us. Casting Crowns has this song, Oh My Soul, and it's a neat song, and I love one of the lyrics. Just get this line: Oh my soul, you are not alone. There's a place where fear has to face the God you know. Oh my soul, you are not alone. There's a place where fear has to face the God you know. So as you reflect on this psalm today, this magnificent psalm of thanksgiving, the writer said that God had redeemed and had gathered and delivered and led and satisfied and filled. God is doing all of this for us. What is 2020 and compared to that? What is 2020 and all it is 2020 compared to the God who redeems and gathers delivers, leads us, and satisfies us and fills us. Oh, my soul, you are not alone. There's a place where fear has to face the God you know. Everything you're afraid of. Again, I love this line. Everything you're afraid of. And the media they do their best to make us afraid of everything. Everything you're afraid of needs to, at some point, meet the God you know. Give thanks to the Lord, today and always. For he is good, and his mercy endures forever. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, and his mercy endures forever. That's a good word for today. You all have a great rest of your Wednesday.